Hashtag We Are Mizzou, reimagining radical black politics in the public PWI. Fred Moulton, English professor and at the University of California, Riverside, said, "It cannot be denied that the university is a place of refuge, and it cannot be accepted that the university is a place of enlightenment. In the face of these conditions, one can only sneak into the university and steal what one can, to abuse its hospitality, despite its mission, to join its refugee colony, its gypsy encampment, to be in but not of. This is the path of the subversive intellectual at the university." We Are Mizzou created a ripple effect across the United States. A sleeping giant rose, a spark was lit, and a new age of student activists were born, and numerous predominantly white institutions shuddered in the aftermath. However, what became noticeably clear after direct action protests were over was that every predominantly white institution did not function the same way. For example, Johns Hopkins University's black students activists were able to rapidly receive the Diversity Faculty Initiative, which promised to invest $25 million over the next 5 years in order to better recruit and retain minority faculty. Additionally, Yale University student activists were able to receive $50 million for practically the same cause. These big dollar initiatives were rarely capable, if ever capable, for public universities. The purpose of bringing this up is to illustrate that the beast of white supremacy and institutional racism manifests itself in a multiplicity of ways. It reforms and adjusts itself in a multiplicity of ways. And with that being said, this is not to say that the people at Johns Hopkins University and Yale University were able to receive more of the students at public universities, but instead, it's that the reforms and adjustments by white supremacist private institutions and the amount of capital these institutions are willing to give up in hopes of maintaining still their white supremacy differs depending upon the social, economic, and political power of these individual institutions. For black students at most public universities, the economic realities of low funds from racist donors or funds primarily from the state and or federal governments, and the political reality of dense anti-black bureaucratic processes makes it any substantial creation of progress seem impossible. This fact requires an alternative politic, one that rearranges the notion of the radical, one that understands that radicalism is not just speaking truth to white institutions of power, but radicalism is gaining, building, and sustaining black power, and not allowing the institutions to assuage student activism with fine dining and meetings that create the facade of progress at the expense of what is needed, namely a cultural, social, political, educational revolution. So what does this look like? I do not intend to provide the dogma of black student activism, but instead I intend to provide an option, an opportunity, a possibility towards a future of radical black activism at the public PWI. So first, in the words of Shea Alamo, Bill Fina-Yawan, and Corey Johnson, 3 remarkable black womanist undergrads at Towson University, the revolution must always be ratchet. This remark reflects the alterity of the black student at the PWI. To be ratchet is to be other. That fact that the black student at any university, and especially at predominantly white universities, cannot be ignored. The idea is reflected both by the hashtag Stay Mad Abby phenomenon and Supreme Court Justice Scaler's remarks about affirmative action and black student admissions into prestigious predominantly white institutions. For the revolution to always be ratchet is for the revolution to maintain its otherness, to always maintain its unwillingness to be co-opted, to always be principally pro-black, unabashedly attached to black culture, black thought, black students, and black people. This concretely means 3 things first. First, that culture is to be taken seriously. Hip-hop, conscious or trap, is not a black student's plaything. It's significantly important for their social and psychological livelihood. Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole are as important to that cyclical livelihood as Migos and Young Thug. Second, black parties are not just spaces where black people go to have fun. Black parties are revolutionary spaces of the subaltern where black people can go to, in the words of Alice Walker, possess the secrets of joy. When those spaces are heavily policed, and militarized, they mirror the policing practices of the rest of black America. and remind black students that the university is nothing more than a microcosm of the macro manifestations that black people have to face across this nation every single day. Third, black sexuality and conversations on black sexuality, regardless if those conversations are being had with giggles and smiles, or if those conversations are being had with sincerity and seriousness, is a sexuality and a conversation not to be disavowed. Embracing and radicalizing intersectional sexual orientations, identities, practices, and methods of discussion are part of the ratchet revolution that must occur at the PWI. Second, in the words of Baby Joker in a screenplay written by record producer, actor, filmmaker, and rapper Ice Cube, no more locked doors. What this means is that we need to have a deconstruction of white bureaucratic ideals of privacy, logistics, and fictitious appearances of progressivism for the sake of public relations. And when word of what Vanilla Silva calls racism without races, black student activists, the job of the black student activists is to criticize and publicize every event, every act of racism, every meeting of institutional power holders, and to open the space up to accountability. Accountability both politically and psychopolitically. Nevertheless, the purpose of this principle is to radicalize the process of change. Change does not occur over coffee, tea, suits, and ties. Change occurs by revolutionizing even the process of making change occur. This means taking seriously what Audre Lorde says when she says, the master's tool will not dismantle the master's house. The master's process of change is not our process of change. Thus, we must open the doors. Third, the radical politic must be driven by radical love. Radical love is a relationship between two persons, one of whom is black, who embark on an ontological quest to be radically political, radically anti-racist, and radically anti-oppressive to one another. All the while additionally being radically subversive to anyone or any institution that dehumanizes. The position of radical love is pluralistic and that denies a unified whole in favor of loving the multiple layers of personhood that make up the black identity. These layers include color, class, gender, sexual orientation, sexual identity, religion, etc. Emphasizing this love makes this love more than a social love or a social bonding. Black radical love is a black radical political theory. For a black person to love themselves is a radical step forward, not only individually, but also socially and politically. Therefore, the same logic must be applied when a black person goes to love others. It is a radical step, a radical move. Therefore, we have to assess blackness through the lens of we have to assess the world through the lens of black particularity, black feminism, black anti-capitalist exploitation, black sexual politics, black anti-elitism, black anti-hierarchicalism, and through this, we can have an analysis that completely denounces white supremacy, how it functions, what caused it, and how we can not only destroy it, but also be able to transcend it. Fourth, transforming what is typically known as radical activism and doing more of what we call radical therapy. This means spreading the idea of activism, since the activist is primarily focused on the political. The radical therapist is primarily focused on the psychopolitical. This means the second wave feminists constructed the mantra, the personal is political. The radical therapist constructs the mantra that the political is psychological. A radical therapist is someone who attempts to deconstruct systems and institutions of oppression through an analysis that acknowledges that socio-political systems operate in ways that affect people psychologically. Psychological trauma invoked by oppression, repression, and subjugation can result in a psychoanalysis like that of Frantz Fanon, where structures of domination are denounced for the sake of political, economic, and anti-racist transformation. This means that black radical therapists is dedicated to black mental health and devoted to transforming the psychological effects of political situations that are damaging to the totality of black personhood. The radicalism is sparked by the openness of the process, the virtual community building in the process, and the trust and faith that is created in the process when new radical therapists emerge, when new relationships are built, and when new conversations start. Robin Kelly says, resistance is our healing. Through collective struggle, we alter our circumstances, contain, escape, or possibly eviscerate the source of trauma, recover our bodies, reclaim and redeem our dead, and make ourselves whole. That is the goal of the radical therapist. 5, we must be practitioners of a world that doesn't exist. This means we have to create the world that we want now. When we ask for black professors, we have to be the black professors we want now. When we ask for black administrators, we have to be the black administrators we want now. When we ask for black counselors, we have to be the black counselors we want now. And what that looks like is creating our own black studies syllabus and teaching each other. What that looks like is creating our own policies together and giving that to the administration that has failed at being able to help black students. And what that looks like is creating self-care and counseling spaces that emerge, that through these counseling spaces, we can become radical destroyers of oppression and radical annihilators of suicidal thoughts that emerge because of white supremacy. We have to begin to occupy and create the university we want now, or destroy the university by being living, breathing examples of what it means to be unapologetically black at all times. This means, in the words of Fred Moten, we have to steal the university, and bring it back to our people. So, by stealing the university, that means bringing it back to the people who attend this university, people who attend other local, national, and regional universities, people who are in high school, people who are in middle school, people who are in the suburbs, people in rural localities, and especially people who are in the hood. We have to create the world of demands within ourselves and build power within ourselves to create the university that we would like to see, and then continually recreate the demands, but concretely devoting ourselves into creating and being a radical space against economic, political, and anti-black exploitation. So in conclusion, I say that we operate on 5 principles. Sustain a ratchet revolution, deconstruct bureaucratic ideals by opening the doors. 3, operating on the principles of radical love, becoming radical therapists alongside radical activists, and imagining and building the world we want.